the practice into maybe three parts. We just spend the first part arriving, move on to some visualizations, maybe metaphors, and then in the final part, my voice will create more gaps of space, of silence, so you can return back into that space which you have all already become very familiar with. I'll ring the bell just to symbolize the start of our little experiment, our little practice. I call it an experiment just because that's exactly what it is. To a degree, we're reducing the amount of stimulation that enters into our experience. Because usually we're amidst people, we're reading books, watching televisions, and listening to something in the background, whether a voice or music. And many of these things stimulate new thought. And sometimes there is so much stimulation, so much new material arising from within the mind that we lose the ability to simply step back and watch. And so, for most of us, the eyes might be closed because we've started to recognize how a lot of stimulation comes in through the eyes, the sense of sight. And so the eyes, the eyelids rather, shut. The body, to a large degree, it's stopped moving. And so, what you might simply be left with are those sensations of restlessness, of pins and needles, of, I don't know, different sensations that may arise during the practice. But nothing necessarily provoked, should we say. You're not running, you're not picking up things, there's no risk of pulling muscles. And so, even with the sensations, you're entering into a space where you can simply observe the different sensations. Initially, maybe the absence of a sensation, and then a sensation may arise, and then it might linger, and then it might fade away before a new sensation arises. But that's a part of the experiment where we observe the different sensations. Maybe the sense of smell and the sense of taste, maybe they're not so relevant unless you have a perfume around you or some incense burning or something like that. Sometimes even just the absence of taste, the absence of a scent or a smell can be something that can be observed and witnessed. Sometimes it's just the production of saliva within the mouth. And then the sense of hearing. The sense of hearing, something we often have only a degree of control over. In my part of the world, I've locked most of my cats outside because we've had those practices in the past where they've disrupted the practice quite innocently. My phone rather, it's been silenced. I've closed the windows. And in the same way, I'm sure you've controlled what you can control, what you have control over, you have silenced, and then the rest of it can become a part of the experiment where you observe the way in which the mind reacts to sounds or the lack of sounds. How often it begins with the absence again. It may appear, it may linger, it may fade away or disappear, and another sound arises. And we watch the mind dance with these different sounds. Did you notice the way in which I use the word dance? Another word you could use is allow. As a sound arises, no matter how sharp or loud or soft it may be, a car alarm, a crying baby, or sometimes just the gentle breeze brushing against leaves outside your window. Watching the way in which the mind defines the sound as good, bad, desirable, undesirable. Watch that judgment. Give it permission. And then allow the mind to dance with a sound or sounds. Sort of like when one partner puts one leg forward and the other one puts the other leg backward. Coming into harmony with the present moment and all that it presents to us. This is our experiment, our ability to observe the way in which we dance with the sensations within our body, the sounds, the smells, and the tastes. Arriving, which means making peace, rather allowing, giving permission to all of the sensations within your body to be exactly as they are. And this includes the warmth or the cold that you may be experiencing through your skin. aware of your posture, aware of the way in which your body interacts with the surfaces that support it, like the chairs and the cushions and the mats underneath you. Find yourself arriving onto these seats. And when we speak of arriving into this present moment, it means releasing all that the mind is thinking about from the past. Because the past, it happened 5 minutes ago, it happened 10 minutes ago, it happened hours, days, weeks, months, years ago. It doesn't matter, but it is the past and it is different from the present moment. And we are interested in the present moment. No matter what happened in your relationship or relationships, no matter what happened, no matter what story is playing out in your finances, in your health or the health of those whom you care and love, that all belongs in a different chapter. And arriving involves the releasing of the previous chapters and turning the page, revealing initially just the first few words on this page called the present moment, and then it becomes more complete and more complete and more complete. A new beginning, a new start. Releasing the need to jump pages or chapters and move into the future. Releasing that habit. But what is a habit? A habit is simply something that happens unconsciously. Many of us here, in fact, most of us here, we've practiced for some time now. We have started to become aware of these patterns that we refer to as habits. Habits to linger on the past. Habits that project themselves into the future, giving us worries, concerns, and anxieties. But the moment we become aware and conscious of these habits, they no longer remain habits. They simply become choices. Choices as to whether to linger on the past or project into the future, or simply a choice to choose the present moment. Let us together choose. Doesn't the word choose feel so much more empowering? Choosing to be here Now, embracing everything, including the mind with its movements and its momentum. When we speak of embracing, we do not mean attempting to contain or hold on to, but simply allowing. Have you noticed what happens when you allow the mind to move? Your identification shifts from that movement to something so much larger, so much more vast. That part that does not move, that does not change, that is eternally present, surrounding every thought, the way in which space surrounds the clouds, the way in which space surrounds the moon and the sun and the stars. As we arrive into this present moment, a little bit more than a moment ago, and more and more. As our identification shifts, back into this core, this essence, this beingness, this presence, we return back home. We remember. We know where it all began. And from this present moment, we recognize how the mind, how it pulls itself towards that which it defines as good, how it's spent a whole lifetime striving towards all that it defines as good. Definitions which were obtained from its parents, schools, advertisers, books, movies, and so on. Very often, things that mean very little to us, things that we may not even be interested in, that we have simply decided to be things that we need to strive towards, that may mean absolutely nothing to us. This is a practice where we return back to the core of our being, where we get to know our true selves, what brings us joy, what brings us peace, what brings us smiles and laughter. We begin to recognize other patterns, how the mind fights against all that it defines as bad, as uncomfortable. Again, definitions accumulated through a whole lifetime of conditioning. With the ringing of the next bell, let us move back into that space free of such definitions and meanings. I think it's the Course in Miracles that begins its first verse in its first chapter. Everything you see, everything you hear, everything you smell and taste and experience through your five senses are not what they appear to be. Let us release all of the definitions that we have accumulated and emerge into the present moment, free of such baggage, definitions. Letting the next in breath represent a new beginning and a new start. As this bell rings, exhaling and releasing all meaning, all definitions, all histories, and all futures. Bringing into the mind's eye an image that we shall use as a metaphor that can represent this beingness, this presence, that this core, this unchanging stillness and depth filled with kindness. Bring into the mind's eye the image of a vast mountain. And you can start by simply recognizing some of the qualities of this mountain. That amongst the structures on this planet that we live on, they appear to have been here the longest. Sometimes they were high up above sea level, and sometimes after the changes in sea levels, they remained mountains but existing deep within the seabeds. Yet, mountains, a presence, each one of these mountains, a presence that has been here since the beginning. And it is this timeless presence within us that we seek to tap into. Find your noses and your ears and your scalps and your heads becoming the peak of this mountain, and your shoulders and your chest and your backs becoming the sides of this magnificent, majestic rock filled with awareness. And whichever mountain you have chosen to be, recognize how unique a presence it is. The ridge of its nose, its ears, its rather your facial expression, the skin around your scalp, shoulders, chest, arms. Can you notice how this mountain, it simply does not attempt to emulate or imitate any of the other mountains. It stands as it is, knowing its right to be a unique expression, a combination of passions, interests, tastes, and so much more that makes up that who you have come to define yourself to be. A very specific and unique doorway into the present moment. each of us in a different room, in a different geographical location, each of us completing a jigsaw puzzle with countless pieces, each crucial in completing this image we refer to as the present moment. None of them more important than the other, none of them less important than the other. Releasing the need to distinguish between those present moments experienced by those we consider to be celebrities, so called important politicians, those who live under the bridges without shelter that we refer to as homes. Each precious, precious doorway into this present moment, which we take in with its sounds and its sensations and its shadows and its lights and all that you may be experiencing through those doorways we refer to as the senses. Can you notice how sometimes, where time gets involved, hence the word sometimes, you find yourself moving into the past? Not moving into the past physically, but thinking about the past. Thinking about the future, perhaps it could be something as something like your timetable, or sometimes something that carries a greater emotional, gravitational force, an anxiety, something that you may be worried about. As you allow yourself to think, as you allow yourself to notice these movements and these momentums, these storms and clouds that we are about to refer to as the mind, simply understand, or rather contemplate on the possibility that we have spent most of our lives identified as these clouds, as this mist, as these constant changes that unfold around us from moment to moment and breath to breath. The next bell, be a beginner. Once again, a beginner who's never meditated before, who's never practiced meditation or mindfulness before, completely identified with the mind. One of those moments where you felt worried, anxiety, sad, stressed, frustrated, all but examples of pure identification with the clouds. And often the clouds, they keep emerging, sometimes through our relationships, which stimulate new thoughts. By listening to the news or pursuing those likes and fighting against the dislikes, a constant flow of clouds, which this experiment to a large degree has helped slow down. All that we find are the clouds that have already been created. We are now producing less clouds, and therefore it becomes a little bit easier to observe the way in which the clouds appear, linger, and disappear. The next bell, a shift. The next bell, helping us to shift. Remind ourselves of who we truly are. An identification shifting from the clouds and the mist and the changing light, where days turn into nights and nights into days. A shift from the changing to the changeless. This bell bringing you back where you remember yourself to be this mountain. The next few words to help ground us a little bit deeper into the present moment. For this, bring your attention back to your breath. Just breathing as normally and as comfortably as you normally would. But following your breath as deep into the body as you are able to. And for most of us, it might just simply involve following the breath down into the stomach, as you watch the stomach wall rise and fall, rise and fall, just like the waves beating up on a beach on a warm and gentle day. No effort, assuming that the stomach lies within the center of our gravitational field. But now recognizing that this mountain has a much larger part that lies underneath the earth. And with the ringing of the next bell, lowering your center of gravity deep down into the earth, connecting you with the core of this planet. It's almost as though you were reaching that part within the earth that consists of molten lava, which blends into all of the other mountain peaks, continents, bases of the oceans, and so much more. Recognizing the oneness, that complete image. Once all of the little pieces of the present moment are put together, changing the pace of your breath by breathing in as deeply as you can and following the breath deep down into this core that connects you to something so much more vast and complete than even this mountain peak that we once perceived to be so vast, yet a part of something so much more that we shall not attempt to define. Having anchored ourselves into this, into that, bringing our attention to the movements around us, the mind, the clouds, the mist, the days, followed by sunsets that lead into darkness, that lead into sunrises, and a cycle that unfolds. But yet, every moment, the most precious moment, the sunset no longer being more important than the daylight. The summers are no longer more important than the winters. Each precious in its own right, each standing on its own experience, free of the need to judge or compare. Breathing in as deeply as you can, pausing once you've reached the capacity of the lungs and the stomach, then taking in a little bit more air, before breathing out as slowly and as gently, allowing you to magnify every sensation that is being experienced, whether through the stomach, the rib cage, and the lungs, the nasal passage, and the nostrils, and the upper lip. This is the point where my voice will start giving you more space. And soon you will find my voice to be no different from the clouds. Clouds that have an ending, a close, followed by space and silence and stillness. Before water molecules begin to rearrange themselves, forming new clouds that emerge from the silence and the stillness. But our attention shifting from form and sound to these spaces, what appear to start off as gaps, gaps that soon reveal themselves as vast amounts of space, surrounding every cloud, every moon, every sun, every star, every galaxy. simply using your breath, or rather the sensations that remind you that you are breathing, to bring you back to the only moment. The bell, each bell, the practice beginning, a new breath, a new beginning, a new frequency or wavelength or whatever it is you would like to refer to it as. Here you begin to discover how little you need my voice when you have the present moment. Maybe even returning to the practice of arriving, because that's all this practice is ever about. Shifting from stories, whatever you might be thinking about when you're walking, when you're running for a train, or all of those other things we run towards or from, returning back to the contact between surfaces, sensations, the sounds of this moment. Later on, when your eyes were open, the colors, the shapes, the textures, that as the Course in Miracles says, are not quite what they appear to be. but for the meaning we give them. Discovering, perhaps for the first time, our ability to redefine these images, our ability to redefine the words and the sounds and the sensations and the tastes and the smells from moment to moment, from breath to breath. And the experiment, with the next bell, the experiment continues. The eyelids will begin to open. There will be new sounds as we begin moving through our rooms and our homes and our little worlds. There will be new tastes and smells and physical sensations. But this practice, these practices, they allow us to filter this energy that surrounds us, these vibrating atoms and molecules around us, through this space of infinite kindness, a space where patience is no longer required, for there is presence and contentment in arriving, where there is love beyond conditions, a love that brings joy and stillness and peace and smiles and laughter, no longer relying on the conditions that surround us. Another beautiful practice. Thank you so much for joining in this practice. Deeply appreciated. Always.
Thank you, Bernard.
It's a pleasure. Take care, my beautiful friend. Love to all of you.
Bye.